All right. So last time, I think we mostly sort of talked about setting up the characters and the situation of the European club and some of the basic conflicts here. Right? We went and talked a little bit about Albert Memmi's classifications of colonizer-colonized relationships. So there's a lot more, I think, that happens in this 100 pages than in the first 100 pages of the novel, right? So I know that Lindsay, you have some very strong opinions about the characters. Otherwise, I mean, like, how's a particular incidents here that stood out to you that you guys want to discuss?
There's a lot of them.
All right.
God, I don't even know where to start. The one with Mohammed, the shooting part.
Okay. Yes. The only thing that gets Elizabeth excited in Burma, right, is shooting, right? She really, really seems keen on getting a chance to kill something. But yeah, there's let's focus on, why don't any of these work? Because no one ever uses this classroom, so no one notices that. Let's focus for a moment here on what happens with Mahlamet, right? So if we go to the first incident in which Flory expels her from the house. Right, if we look on page 113, meanwhile, Flory had turned Mahlamet out of his house. It's a pretty flat statement, right? All right, turn her out of the house. She's gone. Right? A nasty, dirty job. There was sufficient pretext. She had stolen his gold cigarette case and pawned it at the house of Li Yik, the Chinese grocer and illicit pawnbroker in the bazaar, but still, it was only a pretext. Flory knew perfectly well, and Mahlamet knew, and all the servants knew, that he was getting rid of her because of Elizabeth, because of the Ingalekma with dyed hair, as Mahlamet called her. So, the arrival of the English girl in Kyoktada leads Flory to discard his Burmese mistress over something that wouldn't have bothered him a week ago, right? He wouldn't have cared about this a week ago, right? She's been doing this kind of stuff to him all the time. And in fact, Li Yik, the grocer, right, is Flory's friend. Right? He goes to this guy's shop, they drink tea together. Mahlamet made no violent scene at first. She stood sullenly listening while he wrote her a check for 100 rupees. Li Yik, or the Indian chetty in the bazaar, would cash checks, and told her that she was dismissed. He was more ashamed than she. He could not look her in the face, and his voice went flat and guilty. When the bullock cart came for her belongings, he shut himself in the bedroom, skulking till the scene should be over. Now, what do you notice about the language here in which he gets rid of her? What does he do to make her go away here?
He gives her money.
He gives her money, and then what does he tell her?
You're dismissed.
You're dismissed, yeah. What does this look like? If somebody gives you a check and tells you you're dismissed, what does that usually
like
mean?
he's firing her
Yeah.
from a job, like she was a prostitute, and he's just like,
Yeah.
I don't know, something like that.
It's exactly like that, right? He's treating her like an employee. Right? Here's your check. You're fired. Right? go to the bazaar, get it cashed, get your stuff out of here, right? Clear out your desk.
Like they never had a relationship of any sort.
Yeah, there's no emotional anything here on his side, right? Now, it's not as though Mahua Mei actually loves him, right? He bought her from her parents, right? She is a piece of his property, essentially. But she has been representing herself as a white man's wife because according to her custom, that's what she is. Cartwheels grated on the drive. There was the sound of men shouting. Then suddenly there was a fearful uproar of screams. Flory went outside. They were all struggling round the gate in the sunlight. Mahua Mei was clinging to the gatepost, and Khosla was trying to bundle her out. She turned a face full of fury and despair towards Flory, screaming over and over, "Thakin, Thakin, 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 Thakin." It hurt him to the heart that she should still call him Thakin after he had dismissed her. "What is it?" he said. It appeared that there was a switch of false hair that Mahua Mei and Ma Yi both claimed. Flory gave the switch to Ma Yi and gave Mahua Mei 2 rupees to compensate her. Then the cart jolted away, with Mahua Mei sitting beside her 2 wicker baskets, straight-backed and sullen, and nursing a kitten on her knees. It was only 2 months since he had given her the kitten as a present. This is pretty sordid, right? This is a pretty ugly side of Flory's character. And I think that the way Flory's appearance is described to us in the novel, and the way he is often represented dealing with other people in moments of shame, isn't somehow related to these kinds of ugly scenes, right? So what's noteworthy about Flory's appearance? What feature does he have that he's self-conscious about?
His birthmark.
Yeah, he has this ugly birthmark, right? And that's the one that doesn't work. Is this ugly birthmark that looks like a giant, bruise across one side of his face. And when he is dealing with other Europeans in particular, how does he tend to behave in relation to this particular feature?
Shy, like he puts his head down. I don't know.
Yeah, he always tries to turn his face
And he always
the other
brings
way,
it
right?
up too. Like,
Yeah.
Kind of like when he was going to kiss Elizabeth. And then
Yeah. But in order to do so, he'd have to look her full on,
Yeah.
right? With the birthmark, right? With that great big stain on his face. And I think that this birthmark in part represents his shame over his connections to Burma. Right? He's not necessarily ashamed of the way he treats Mahua Mei. He's not necessarily ashamed of the fact that he has been having sex with a Burmese mistress for however long. He is ashamed, really, of what other Europeans think of his friendships with people like Dr. Viraswamy and Li Yik and Mahua Mei, right? Other people can't know, right? This is the great big bruise on his face. This is the thing he has to keep hidden. So then if we look a little further on, when Mahua Mei appears again, right, she's in his house. And let's see, where? Look on page 152. The woman has come back, said Khosla. Flory had turned very pale. When he turned pale, the birthmark made him hideously ugly, right? The birthmark again appearing in relation to Mahlame. A pang like a blade of ice had gone through his entrails. Mahlame had appeared in the doorway of the bedroom. She stood with her face downcast, looking at him from beneath lowered brows. Thakin, she said in a low voice, half sullen, half urgent. Go away, said Flory angrily to Kosla, venting his fear and anger upon him. Thakin, she said, come into the bedroom here. I have a thing to say to you. He followed her into the bedroom. In a week, it was only a week, her appearance had degenerated extraordinarily. Her hair looked greasy. All her lockets were gone, and she was wearing a Manchester longi of flowered cotton costing 2 rupees 8 annas. So she's wearing a cheap English imitation of a traditional Burmese garment. She had coated her face so thick with powder that it was like a clown's mask, right, to make herself look more white. And at the roots of her hair, where the powder ended, there was a ribbon of natural colored brown skin. She looked a drab. Flory would not face her, but stood looking sullenly through the open doorway to the veranda. What do you mean by coming back like this? Why did you not go home to your village? I am staying in Kyoktara at my cousin's house. How can I go back to my village after what has happened? And what do you mean by sending men to demand money from me? How can you want more money already when I gave you 100 rupees only a week ago? How can I go back, she repeated, ignoring what he had said. Her voice rose so sharply that he turned round. She was standing very upright, sullen, with her black brows drawn together and her lips pouted. So what does he think is the only thing Mahlame wants from him? Yeah, he thinks the only thing she cares about, right? The only thing she gives a shit about is money and stuff that she can take from his house and pawn. What does he not understand about what she actually got from him? What is it that she actually, why is it she can't go back to her village?
She kind of like status from him, didn't she? From
Yes.
marrying the white man. And
Yes.
she can't go back because it's embarrassing to her, and her reputation will be ruined. Right?
Yeah. And he doesn't understand this, right? He doesn't understand that he is dealing with a culture in which shame, humiliation, and social standing are very, very important things, right? And to be a discarded wife is humiliating. Right? So if she goes back to her village, she goes back in disgrace. She can't just go back when he doesn't want her anymore. Right? This is a human being, not a toy.
Also, she keeps bringing up that he took her youth away from her.
Yeah.
Which is true. Like, he bought her from her parents. I don't know how young she was whenever he did, but I mean, he did rob her of her youth. She can't go back and get that time back.
Yeah. She knows that, nobody else is going to marry her now.
Now that she's married, or what, she wasn't really married, but married a white man. Nobody in her village is going to want her after that, I guess.
Yeah. Nobody in the village, nobody in her own village is going to want her. The life of relative ease that she enjoyed with him is gone as well, right? She'll be working hard along with everybody else in the village. So, that would suck. But the real thing here, the real issue, is the shame, right? The reduction in social prestige. And I think this is one of the things that Flory really fails to understand is the importance of social prestige, right? Why does Dr. Viraswamy, for example, want to join the European Club?
For prestige.
For prestige, right? And what does he want that prestige for? Does he actually intend to use the club if he's admitted?
No. He just wants it. Isn't it because he doesn't want all the people to believe all the rumors about him, and he wants that status of being in the European?
Yeah, that prestige, right? He doesn't even really necessarily care about the status. Right? He is the highest ranking native official in the town. But for Viraswamy, right, the prestige equals protection. Yeah, it's like, as you were saying, like if he joins the European Club, then that gives him some measure of protection against Upokin and Upokin's machinations, right? But then, in a kind of ironic twist, why is it that Upokin wants Veeraswamy out of the way in the first place?
So that he can get in the club?
Yeah, he wants to be the first native member admitted into the Kyottada European Club. Does he want this for the same reason Veeraswamy does?
Not really, not necessarily. Doesn't he want it for like the power, the status?
Status is part of it. I think it's complicated though,
yeah.
right?
He says several reasons, but I can't really remember what they all were. I just remember him saying that it would make him look good because he has money or whatever, but
he's
they
rich,
still are living kind of poorly, I guess.
Yeah, they're living richly by rural Burmese standards, right? But they're not living the way he really wants, and it doesn't even have anything to do with stuff, right? You know, Ma Kin, gets alarmed. It's like, wait, you're not going to buy a car, are you? And he says rightly, right? Like, what use would a car be here, right? There's only one car in the village. It belongs to McGregor, and where there are no good roads, someone in a car is pointless anyway, right? It's a prestige contraption, right? But if we look on page 143, right? Do you not see, woman? Do you not see that if Veeraswamy is disgraced, I shall be elected to the club myself? The effect of it was crushing. There was not another word of argument on Ma Kin's part. The magnificence of Upokin's project had struck her dumb. And not without reason, for all the achievements of Upokin's life were as nothing beside this. It is a real triumph. It will be doubly so in Kyottada. For an official of the lower ranks to worm his way into the European Club, that remote, mysterious temple, that holy of holies, far harder of entry than Nirvana. Pokin, the naked gutter boy of Mandalay, the thieving clerk and obscure official, would enter that sacred place, call Europeans old chap, drink whiskey and soda, and knock white balls to and fro on the green table. Ma Kin, the village woman, who had first seen the light through the chinks of a bamboo hut thatched with palm leaves, would sit on a high chair with her feet imprisoned in silk stockings and high-heeled shoes. Yes, she would actually wear shoes in that place. Talking to English ladies in Hindustani about baby linen. It was a prospect that would have dazzled anybody. So, if Upokin is admitted to the club, how do the club members then have to treat him? If he's a member of the club, if he's one of them, yeah, they would have to treat him as a social equal. That's what he's after. Right? So as vicious a character as he seems through much of the narrative here, right? What he wants, what he really, really wants, God, I feel like a freaking Spice Girls, is for the European authorities in Kyottada to have to deal with him as an equal and not as a subordinate. To have to treat him like a person, like them, as a member of the club. And we know, too, like from the description early in the narrative, right, that the club is a shithole. Right? It's a wretched little building in the middle of nowhere that's moth-eaten, with a bunch of not very funny cartoons up on the walls, with a pool table that people can't use, or they can't even get ice most of the time, right? For their chilled beverages. So, to the Europeans, the club isn't much. But to Upokin, it's a big deal. To Dr. Veeraswamy, it's a big deal. right? To Viraswamy, it's protection. To Upokin, it's equality, right? To Upokin, it's inclusion, finally being a part of things. They can't look down on him anymore. So that's what's so important to them about the club. But this is directly related as well to Mahomet's problems with Flori, right? That Flori's rejection of her causes her an incredible loss of face. And we see that kind of symbolically played out in the way her appearance, as Flori puts it, degenerates over the course of these meetings, right? So she goes from being sort of powdered and pampered concubine to sort of having like the powder fading from her face. So, you know, by the time she accosts him outside the club, it's this Pikes on Pay-like, she is no longer wearing any makeup, right? And her hair, you know, the hair extensions that she had had come out, and, you know, everything that she had done to make herself look more European is vanished. That's all gone. I also think I don't know, I don't really quite know what to do with this, but I also find it interesting and a little disturbing that Orwell keeps referring to kittens alongside Burmese women. I'm not quite sure what's going on there, but it's creepy. All right, so what did you think of the, let's compare Elizabeth here a little bit to her, or Mahomet a little bit here to her counterpart, Elizabeth Lackerstein. You really don't like Elizabeth either. What's wrong with Elizabeth Lackerstein?
She belongs in that group that we talked about last time, Colonial something.
Yeah, okay, right. There's the colonizer, the colonial, the colonized, right?
Yeah.
The colonial, according to me, is someone like Flori.
Oh, not that.
Yeah, but she would be like part of that colonizer group, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. The people who think it's their right and their duty to, you know, to treat the colonized like crap.
She's rude.
Uh-huh.
About everything to do
Yeah.
with the Burmese people and their traditions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he takes her to that performance, right? He hears the sounds, he gets excited, and he says, oh, hey, you'll really like this. Let me show you a little piece of Burma here. And just so that you guys have some sense, actually, of what one of these looks like, I have a clip here of a dance from one of these play performances. It's by a popular performer from Myanmar called Bo Lin. And it's not, like, I couldn't really find something for free on YouTube that was all that similar to the dance that's described in the novel. But this will give you a sense of like what these spectacles look like and sound like. Right? This is a male performer doing a kind of clowning dance. Okay. So this is the kind of performance that Flory takes Elizabeth to watch. Now, I think it would be worth dwelling for a minute on Flory's response to the performance. Or if you look on page 104, right, one, it shows a tremendous misreading of Elizabeth and of her attitude. And also, it's a good example of the way Flory tends to romanticize things, right? I knew this would interest you. That's why I brought you here. You've read books and been in civilized places. You're not like the rest of us miserable savages here. Don't you think this is worth watching in its queer way? Just look at that girl's movements. Look at that strange bent forward pose like a marionette, and the way her arms twist from the elbow like a cobra rising to strike. It's grotesque. It's even ugly with a sort of willful ugliness. And there's something sinister in it too. There's a touch of the diabolical in all Mongols, right? So he's still like participating in this European tendency to generalize. And yet, when you look closely, what art, what centuries of culture you can see behind it. Every movement that girl makes has been studied and handed down through innumerable generations. Whenever you look closely at the art of these Eastern peoples, you can see that. A civilization stretching back and back, practically the same, into times when we were dressed in woad. In some way that I can't define to you, the whole life and spirit of Burma is summed up in the way that girl twists her arms. When you see her, you can see the rice fields, the villages under the teak trees, the pagodas, the priests in their yellow robes, the buffaloes swimming the rivers in early morning, Tiba's palace. So he's talking a lot of bullshit here, right? And one thing that we have to note here, right, is this dance that he is sort of reading as a metaphor for all Burmese culture throughout history, which one, he represents it as completely unchanged, right, from its very beginnings to the present, as though, you know, nothing here has ever been any different since the beginning of the world. But he's also like, this is popular entertainment, right? This is a popular spectacle. Right? It's not necessarily meant to be high art or a metaphor for Burmese culture writ large. Right? The girl is dancing to entertain the audience. And I think this is a thing we often tend to forget about art generally, right? That even like most of what we consider high art in the Western tradition is just pop culture of an earlier age, right? If we look, for example, at the ancient Greek tragedies, Euripides and Aeschylus and Sophocles weren't necessarily trying to make high art. They were trying to win a contest. Right? They were trying to entertain the entire populace of Athens, right? Shakespeare's plays weren't written to be high art, and they weren't regarded as high art until the 18th century. Right? It was popular culture. It was looked down on by art snobs in the 16th century as pop culture, right? So Flory is making that mistake of confusing pop culture. And look, like, this is not something that requires no skill to put together, right? We could see, for example, from Bolin's performance there, that what he's doing requires a great deal of agility, right? Requires a great deal of balance, probably, quite a good bit of practice, and also some sense of being able to read the audience and give them what they want. But yeah, so Flory's talking a lot of bullshit about this. Now, what about Elizabeth? What's her response to this? His voice stopped abruptly as the music stopped. There were certain things, and a play dance was one of them, that pricked him to talk discursively and cautiously. But now he realized that he'd only been talking like a character in a novel, and not a very good novel. He looked away. Elizabeth had listened to him with a chill of discomfort. What was the man talking about? Moreover, she had caught the hated word art more than once. For the first time, she remembered that Flory was a total stranger and that it had been unwise to come out with him alone. She looked round her at the sea of dark faces and the lurid glare of the lamps. The strangeness of the scene almost frightened her. What was she doing in this place? Surely it was not right to be sitting among the black people like this, almost touching them, in the scent of their garlic and their sweat. Why was she not back at the club with the other white people? Why had he brought her here, among this horde of natives, to watch this hideous and savage spectacle? So, do you notice anything about her response to being surrounded by the Burmese? What is it that bothers her so much?
She feels like disgusted. I feel like to be touching them and around them so close and at them.
Yeah, she feels like a physical revulsion at contact with them, right? She felt this sort of physical revulsion at contact with difference. Now, we talked about Robinson Crusoe, right? And I think we've also discussed this in terms of other texts as well, like the idea of sort of response to being the power minority in an area, right, is to either submerge oneself amongst the native population, as Flory sort of tries unsuccessfully to do, right, or to maintain those strict and rigid boundaries between you and the other, right? And Elizabeth definitely seems to follow that latter strategy, right? She wants to maintain very, very strictly the division between white people and native Burmans, right? So this is what the club largely means to her. Flory hates the club, right? Flory thinks the club is bullshit. Flory thinks the club is pointless. Flory thinks the club are snobs and bores. But Elizabeth likes it, right? Elizabeth is very much pro-club. In fact, let's see where... There's a bit where it's clear that she... Right, if we look at on page 110, right? Flory did not see much more of Elizabeth that evening. Everyone was in the lounge together, and there was the silly clattering chatter about nothing that there is on these occasions. Flory could never keep up that kind of conversation for long. But for Elizabeth, the civilized atmosphere of the club with the white faces all around her and the friendly look of the illustrated papers and the Bonzo pictures, reassured her after that doubtful interlude at the Puey. So for her, this is safe space, right? This is a little island of Europe, and not Paris, right? That place she hates so much that her mother dragged her to. But the most bourgeois, Philistine parts of England, right? Solidly middle-class England, right? That's what she wants, that's what she likes, and that's what she gets in the club, damn it.
Her and him are not good to me.
No. They
know nothing about, she's boring.
Yeah.
She doesn't like talking about
No.
interesting and intelligent things.
Yeah.
Instead, she's just very simple.
Yeah, what's the one thing that she likes?
Shooting.
Shooting, yeah. She gets so excited
Tennis.
about the prospect of going shooting, yeah. Shooting and tennis, yeah, okay, tennis, yeah.
They talk about the weather, like, and they
Yeah.
don't have meaningful conversations.
Yeah.
She's just not that kind of person.
No, she's no interest in having deeper conversations with anybody, right? And does she have any interest in getting to know Burma at all?
No.
None whatsoever, right? He takes her to the bazaar. That's a failure. If we look at where he goes to talk about, he takes her to Li Yek's shop. Right. She gets, she won't drink his tea.
Yeah.
And she, just as Flory doesn't understand that he has shamed Mahlame, right? Elizabeth doesn't care that she shames Li Yek and that she shames that village headman for refusing their hospitality, right? Yeah, it's not so much a lack of understanding there as a lack of caring, because she doesn't regard them, I don't know if she doesn't regard them as human or that she doesn't regard them as human in the same way she is, right? To her, they're not fully people.
She thinks she's better than them or like above them.
Oh, yeah.
Is what I get from it.
Yeah, because he's like
Mhm.
trying to explain, well, I think they brought the tea over from.
Yeah, it's like
and it has orange blossoms in it.
Yeah.
She's like, it tastes
It's
like
like the-
grass.
Yeah, they actually went to a lot of trouble, right? He talks about like the making of fish sauce, right? And he's like, oh, it's actually pretty wholesome. He's like, oh, it's disgusting. Why would they do that to prawns? If we look at the text where they're given the tea, let's see, page 130. Right. At this moment, Li Yek came back with two fat, round-faced Burmese girls, evidently sisters, giggling and carrying between them two chairs and a blue Chinese teapot holding half a gallon. The two girls were or had been Li Yek's concubines. The old man had produced a tin of chocolates and was prizing off the lid and smiling in a fatherly way, exposing three long tobacco-blackened teeth. Elizabeth sat down in a very uncomfortable frame of mind. She was perfectly certain that it could not be right to accept these people's hospitality. One of the Burmese girls had at once gone behind the chairs and began fanning Flory and Elizabeth, while the other knelt at their feet and poured out cups of tea. Elizabeth felt very foolish with the girl fanning the back of her neck and the Chinaman grinning in front of her. Flory always seemed to get her into these uncomfortable situations. She took a chocolate from the tin Li Yek offered her, but she could not bring herself to say thank you. Is this all right? She whispered to Flory. All right. I mean, ought we to be sitting down in these people's house? Isn't it sort of infra-dig? It's all right with it. It's all right with the Chinese man. They're a favored race in this country, and they're very democratic in their ideas. It's best to treat them more or less as equals. This tea looks absolutely beastly. It's quite green. You'd think they'd have the sense to put milk in it, wouldn't you? It's not bad. It's a special kind of tea old Li Yek gets from China. It has orange blossoms in it, I believe. Ugh, it tastes exactly like earth, she said, having tasted it. So she refuses any kind of encounter with the unfamiliar, right? Unless she gets to shoot and kill it. Then, all's fun and games, right? Woohoo hunting, woohoo shooting. But yeah, she doesn't care whether she insults Lee Ek or not. She doesn't care what trouble he had to get to import that tea or whatever, right? Makes no difference to her. What matters is that she feels a sense of physical disgust at his appearance. And then when the little kid pisses on the floor, right, she just goes nuts. She can't handle that. But then we go to page 133 and we look at sort of what heals the breach then between Flory and Elizabeth, right? They walked up the road, he to the left of her and a little behind. He watched her averted cheek and the tiny gold hairs on her nape beneath the brim of her Tarai hat. How he loved her, how he loved her. It was as though he had never truly loved her till this moment, when he walked behind her in disgrace, not even daring to show his disfigured face. He made to speak several times and stopped himself. His voice was not quite steady, and he did not know what he could say that did not risk offending her somehow. At last he said, flatly, with a feeble pretense that nothing was the matter, "It's getting beastly hot, isn't it?" With the temperature 90 degrees in the shade, it was not a brilliant remark. To his surprise, she seized on it with a kind of eagerness. She turned to face him, and she was smiling again. "Isn't it simply baking?" With that they were at peace. The silly, banal remark, bringing with it the reassuring atmosphere of club chatter, had soothed her like a charm. What's the only way she knows how to communicate?
Simple conversation.
Yeah,
Just like meaningless small talk.
Yeah, bullshit small talk, right? That's all she can do. That's all she wants to do. She doesn't want to have deep conversations. She doesn't want to think about art. She doesn't want to think about history. She doesn't want to think about culture. She doesn't really want to learn anything new, right? I mean, her favorite word seems to be beastly. Right? Everything's beastly. And this is part of how he gets back into her good graces, right? Is criticizing Burma, right? Isn't it beastly hot? And using her favorite word. Now, given what we've noticed about the way Elizabeth responds to Burma, to difference generally, right? What is it that leads her to cut Flory off?
Her aunt tells him about Ma.
Yeah, she finds out about Ma Lame, right? Her aunt tells her, "Oh, you know he keeps a Burmese woman." And the fact that Flory has been in intimate physical contact with not just one, but actually a history of Burmese women upsets Elizabeth enough to cut him off, right? To her, this means he's polluted. To her, this means he's filthy, right? So let's actually sort of look at where this happens in chapter 16 or 17. All right, she cuts him off, and page 195, right? It was dreadful. He could not face her after that. He turned to hurry out of the club, and then dared not even pass the door of the card room, lest she should see him. He went into the lounge, wondering how to escape, and finally climbed over the veranda rail and dropped onto the small square of lawn that ran down to the Irrawaddy. Right? So he won't even walk out the front door of the club, right, to leave. He has to jump off the patio onto the road, right? The sweat was running from his forehead. He could have shouted with anger and distress. The accursed luck of it, to be caught out over a thing like that. Keeping a Burmese woman, and it was not even true. But much use would it ever be to deny it. Ah, what damned evil chance could have brought it to her ears. Now, why does he say it's not even true? It's not true anymore.
I guess
right?
to make himself feel better.
Yeah.
Or say, like, oh, I kicked her out. That's not true.
Yeah, to make himself feel like the wronged party, right? But it is true. And this isn't the first. And Mahlame, we know, is not the first Burmese woman that he has, whose life he's damaged, right? You know, we have that story he tells, you know, so he goes back in his memory to that woman, Rosa McPhee, the Eurasian woman he'd had an affair with in Rangoon, and then just cut her off and stopped answering her letters, right? And on page 196, just before Mahlame shows up, for a long time, Floria remained standing by the riverbank. The moon was up, mirrored in the water like a broad shield of electron. The coolness of the outer air had changed Floria's mood. He had not even the heart to be angry any longer, for he had perceived, with the deadly self-knowledge and self-loathing that come to one at such a time, that what had happened served him perfectly right. For a moment, it seemed to him that an endless procession of Burmese women, a regiment of ghosts, were marching past him in the moonlight. Heavens, what numbers of them. 1,000. No, but a full 100 at the least. I is right, he thought despondently. Their heads turned towards him, but they had no faces, only featureless discs. He remembered a blue longi here, a pair of ruby earrings there, but hardly a face or a name. The gods are just, and of our pleasant vices, pleasant indeed, make instruments to plague us. He had dirtied himself beyond redemption, and this was his just punishment. So, a couple of things to note in this, right? So he sees this procession of Burmese women whom he has known in the intimate sense. But he can't seem to recall specific detail, like he can't bring to mind whole bodies, right? He remembers pieces of women. He remembers this woman's clothes, this woman's earrings, right? This woman's scent. And none of them have faces. Right? He says that all of their faces appear to be featureless discs. Now, what does this suggest that they were to him? Or weren't? Perhaps is the better question. Why would these women have no faces? What's being brought home to him in his memory here? About how he's dealt with them or how he's treated them.
He's treating them like they're not human, I guess.
Yeah, like they're not really people, right? Like they're not individuals. He starts having this kind of epiphany, right? This revelation. And we think it's going to go one way. Like, oh, what a life I've led. But then at the end of this, he says he had dirtied himself beyond redemption. So is he asking for forgiveness from these women in his memory? When he's thinking that he's dirtied himself beyond redemption. Who's he thinking like here?
Elizabeth.
He's thinking like Elizabeth, yes. He's not thinking in terms of the wrong he has done to this procession of Burmese women. He's thinking in terms of his own physical pollution, right? He's regarding himself as physically polluted and thinking that Elizabeth is right to reject him. And then Mahomet shows up and starts demanding more money, right? As if to sort of further dig in the knife here, right? But he still has no real sense of his own wrongdoing, right? He does come to the conclusion that Elizabeth is right to cut him dead, but not because he has treated these Burmese women poorly, but because he's been with them at all. Now, I think it would also probably, like, you know, I gotta be honest, like, I hate talking about this particular scene because of my general soft-heartedness towards animals. But it's probably worth talking about the hunt a little bit as well, right? In part because what it reveals about both of these people. Right? Elizabeth is super, super eager, as we've noted, to go shooting. Right? All she wants is to go out into the bush and fire a gun. And what do they end up killing?
The leopard.
Yeah, and just the way they kill the leopard, it's so cruel and slow and pointless, right? There's the point. You know, I can't go back to the passage because it's kind of painful to read.
Yeah, it made me upset.
Yeah.
And then because they talked about how he was just smaller and like, I think that was the word they used.
Yeah,
like
that it doesn't look nearly as big and scary
Yeah.
when it's dead, right? They notice it's actually kind of a small leopard, and it looks almost kittenish.
It wasn't bothering them or anything. They just
Yeah, the beaters go into the bush and they drive it towards them, and they kill it. And Elizabeth gets to keep the skin, right? And she's gung-ho about this from the beginning. Ooh, I hope we get to kill the leopard, right? I heard there was a leopard out here. I hope we get to kill it. And right, Flory didn't bring the right cartridges, so he's shooting, and you know, the leopard, it's hitting the leopard, but it's not killing it. And so I think sort of this is of a piece with Flory's treatment of these Burmese women, which is why I bring this up here and now, right? Is that Flory generally doesn't mean to be cruel, right? He's not intentionally cruel. He's cruel through carelessness. He's cruel through a certain level of indifference, right? He's cruel to the leopard in the same way he's been cruel to these women. Now, granted, he didn't shoot any of them, but the way one treats animals, right, is often an indication of how one is likely to treat other people.
says a lot about their character.
Yeah. And the beauty of the animals that they go hunting, they're these gorgeous pigeons, right? And you know, Flory keeps waxing poetic about the beauty of these pigeons, but it doesn't stop him from shooting them. Right? He's still happy to fire the gun and watch it drop. So I think sort of like as we go forward here, this is an important thing to continue thinking about. It's like just the casual, careless cruelty that the Europeans generally display. You look like you were about to say something?
Could you compare them the way, like, he treats the women like
Yeah, that's what I was
that
thinking
they're
too.
beautiful,
Uh-huh.
and he takes them and uses them for his sexual desires, I guess.
Yeah.
And then after he's done with them, he drops them like he did with
Yeah.
with the birds. I
Yeah,
guess.
just like he does with the birds, yeah. And yeah, I mean, yeah, he doesn't shoot Malame, but he writes her a check and tells her she's fired.
But he ruins her life. And
Yeah.
I mean, this is cruel, but I think that she would be better off, she feels like she would be better off dying than going back to her village.
Sure,
She
and
even talks
mhm.
about killing herself. doesn't
Yeah.
she?
And she says that she should kill herself, right, rather than go back to her village.
He basically does kill the women, honestly.
Mhm.
He kills their reputation.
Yeah. Even without pulling the trigger, he still basically ends their lives.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd buy that.
And I think the fact that he keeps like instead of he keeps like using kittens and like smaller objects,
Uh-huh.
he can never like stand up to anything or kill anything that's like full grown. Because like
Yeah.
Elizabeth is like I think they say her age. She's like 22.
She's
21.
young. She's in her early 20s.
Yeah.
He's 35. She's considerably younger than he is. Yeah.
But we know like Mahame is he purchases her when she's like
She's a teenager. Yeah.
she's a teenager, but
Uh-huh.
I mean like she's basically like a kitten that's been stolen like from its mother. And
Uh-huh.
so like fully dependent on him, and then he's just like he cast her to the side.
Yeah. Yeah. No. Yeah. I think that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, and I think I think that might be what we do with those frequent references to kittens. Why he always sees kittens in association with Burmese women. Yeah. Yeah. I like that. All right. Anything else you guys want to say about this, or any questions you have about it before I give you the final set of reading questions and let you go for the weekend?
It seems that for the colonizers, they usually
Uh-huh.
have a kind of a psychological superiority.
Yeah.
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 And even for Flory, I didn't read the
Mhm.
novel itself, but from your reading and your talk, I think I
Mhm.
can learn something about this man. Maybe in his mind, or he's not very clear about his looking down upon the local people like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And how to say? Sometimes he just trying to get a kind of superior perspective to see
Mhm.
something.
Sure.
But she just get involved with some kind of women,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe he cannot control himself physically or like that. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think, I mean, in his, Flory is presented to us as the most liberal of the Europeans in Kyoktata, right? The others all think he's suspect. He's, not, a real, true, red-blooded, patriotic Englishman. But in a way, he's just as bad as Ellis, right? I mean, Ellis is at least open in his contempt for the people he pushes around. Flory pretends to be better than that, right? Flory pretends that he likes Burma, that he is sort of one with the nation here, right? That his sympathies are on the sides of the Burmese, but he exploits them just as badly as anyone else does.
Yes, and I think
Mm-hmm.
to a certain extent, Flory is split in
Uh-huh.
psychology and body.
Sure.
Yeah.
And the only reason he loves Elizabeth, right, that he's so insistent that he loves Elizabeth, is because she's the only English woman he's seen in years, right? He doesn't love her for any particular quality. I mean, she's, from all we can see, actually a fairly reprehensible person. But she's English, right? He loves her Englishness. That's what he's in love with. Why can he fall in love with Elizabeth, but he couldn't fall in love with Rosa McPhee or with Nahlame or with any of this other endless procession of Burmese women, right? There's still that kind of psychological block there, so what you're saying,
Of
Frank.
course,
Yeah.
the real love, I think, could only happen between some kind of spirit or soul. But in his mind, he didn't. He just looked down upon Muhammad, so that it cannot be true love.
Yeah, there cannot be love if there is not
Yeah.
social equality, right?
Yes.
You can't love someone whom you own. You
Mhm.
can't love someone whom you regard as your inferior.
Yes.
And yeah, I think that the fact that actually is a strong indicator that he does still regard the Burmese by and large as his inferiors, whether he means to or not.
Yeah.
All right, so let me give you the reading questions next time. I have your Kipling quizzes to give back to you, and then you are free to go. Enjoy your weekends, and we'll see you on Tuesday.